Hi kids, my name is Dre Jung from One Family Church in Sydney, Australia. But today I want to tell you a story about when God acts as a matchmaker and how his divine intervention brought two special people together for a reason. This is a story from Genesis chapter 24 of how Isaac and Rebekka met and married to fulfill God's covenant to Abraham. One day when Abraham was well into his hundreds, and after his wife Sarah had sadly passed away, he asked his servant to find his son Isaac a wife. He wanted a godly wife for his son who wasn't a Canaanite woman. So his servant had to travel very far back to Abraham's native land to find a wife for Isaac. But he promised Abraham that he would bring the woman back to where Abraham was living. So the servant left with camels loaded with gifts for Isaac's future wife. One evening, he rested by a well outside the town of Nahor and began to realize how difficult his task was. How was he supposed to find a wife for Isaac without the help of Cupid and a dating app? Of course, the only answer was to ask God, and so he prayed, "Please God, make me successful in finding a wife for my master's son. Be kind to my master and answer his wishes for a godly wife for his son. Show me a sign, God. If a woman offers to pour water from this well for me and my camels, she is the one chosen by God to be Isaac's wife." When you are in trouble, do you ask God for help or do you try to fix the problem yourself? Before Abraham's servant had finished his prayer, a beautiful woman named Rebekka appeared by the well, and when asked by Abraham's servant, offered him and his camels some water. The servant was amazed when he found out that Rebekka was a relative of Abraham, which meant she was a godly woman, and he praised God for his faithfulness. In that moment, he knew that Rebekka was to be Isaac's wife. Do you remember to take the time to thank God for answering your prayers? Rebekka invited the servant to her father Bethuel's home to rest for the night, and she introduced him to her family. Abraham's servant told Rebekka and her family of the purpose of his journey to find Isaac a godly wife and his prayer for a sign from God by the well. After hearing the story, Bethuel knew that this was a match made in heaven and gave his daughter his blessing to leave her hometown and go with Abraham's servant to marry Isaac. After spending 10 days with her family and saying goodbye, Rebekka left with Abraham's servant to meet and marry Isaac, whom she had never met. Do you have the blind faith like Rebekka to be able to trust God with your life without question? I think with God as a matchmaker behind Isaac and Rebekka's meeting, it would have been love at first sight for the two. Join me again next week as we continue the story of how God fulfills his covenant with Abraham through the story of Jacob and Esau. Have a good week. Bye, kids.